Our speaker tonight is Frederick Buechner, a Presbyterian minister turned author, and one of the most compelling writers of our time. I got started reading his books and haven't been able to quit. As a result, I don't think I've ever been as fully prepared to introduce someone as I am tonight. Fred was named by the New York Times as the leading Christian writer of today. He's written 10 novels and 10 nonfiction books of essays and biography. He was born in New York City and studied at Princeton and Union seminaries. He most recently was chaplain at Phillips Exeter, which he left to engage in full-time writing in the seclusion of Paulette, Vermont. I assume it's seclusion. With his wife and Judy and the occasional visits of his 3 grown daughters. In his book, Now and Then, a compelling description of his spiritual journey, Fred asks, what are we looking for when the pastor gets up to preach? He quotes from Karl Barth, whose answer is entertainment and instruction. Well, that's what we're into tonight, as Fred talks about what it means to grow up. Welcome to the Middle West and to the Chicago Sunday Evening Club, Fred Buechner.
Thank you very much. Rich man, poor man, beggar man, thief, doctor, lawyer, merchant chief, or Indian chief, if you happen to be feeling a little more exotic than usual that day. That was how the rhyme went in my time anyway, and you used it when you were counting the cherry pits in your plate, or the petals on a daisy, or counting the buttons in your shirt or your blouse. The one you ended up counting was, of course, the one you ended up being. Rich, poor, standing in a street corner with a tin cup in your hand, or maybe a career in organized crime, who knows? What of the world? What in heaven's name were you going to be when you grew up? It wasn't just another question, it was the great question. And everything I want to say this evening to you is based on the assumption that it still is. Whether we remember to ask it or not, I strongly suspect that it may be the great question always. What are you going to be? What am I going to be? I'll be 60 years old, heaven help me, in my next birthday, and I've been in more or less the same line of work for a long time, and I contemplate no immediate change, but I think of it still as a question that's wide open, at least I hope it's wide open for me. For God's sake, what do you suppose we're going to be, you and I, when we grow up? Something in us rears back in indignation a little bit, I think, that at 20 or 30 or 40 or 50 or 70 or 80 or 110 or whatever we are, surely we've got our growing up behind us. We've come many a long mile and fought many a long fought. We've taken on serious responsibilities, made mature decisions, hoped they were mature anyway, weathered many a crisis, one kind or another. Surely the question is rather, what are we now, and how well are we doing at it, if not doctors and lawyers and merchant chiefs? We are whatever we are, businessmen, businesswomen, computer analysts, whatever they are, school teachers, artists, ecologists, ministers even. We don't have to count cherry pits to find out what we're going to be, end up being, because for better or for worse, the die has already been cast. Now we simply get on with the game. That's what life, after all, is all about. But then maybe we have to listen. Listen back farther even than the rhymes of childhood, thousands of years farther back than that. A thick cloud gathers on the mountain, as the book of Exodus describes it. There are flickers of lightning, jagged and dangerous. A clap of thunder shakes the earth and sets the leaves of the trees trembling, sets even you and me trembling a little bit if we have our wits about us. Suddenly the great shofar sounds, the ram's horn, a long-drawn, pulsing note, louder than thunder, more dangerous than lightning. And out of the darkness, out of the mystery, out of some cavernous part of who we are, a voice calls, "Now therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all peoples, my segullah, the Hebrew word is, my precious ones, my darlings. And ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation." And then, thousands of years later, but still thousands of years ago, there's another voice to listen to. It's the voice of an old man dictating a letter. There's reason to believe that he may actually have been the one who, up to all but the end of his life, Jesus had for his best friend, Peter himself, old Peter. So put away all malice and all guile and insincerity and envy and slander, he says. Like newborn babes, long for the pure spiritual milk, that by it you may grow up to salvation, for you have tasted of the kindness of the Lord. And then he echoes the great cry out of the thunder clouds that Moses heard with a cry of his own. You're a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, he says, that you may declare the wonderful deeds of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. So what are we going to be when we grow up? Not what are we going to do, what profession are we going to follow or keep on following, what niche are we going to choose for ourselves, but what are we going to be inside ourselves and among ourselves? That's the question, I think, that God answers with a Torah at Sinai. That's the question that the old saint answers or tries to answer in his letter from Rome. Holy. That's what we're going to be if God gets his way with us. It's wildly unreasonable because it makes a shambles of all our reasonable ambitions to be this or to be that. It's not really a human possibility at all because holiness is godness, and only God makes holiness possible. But being holy is what growing up in the full sense means, Peter suggests. No matter how old we are, or how much we've achieved or dream of achieving, we're not truly grown up till this extraordinary thing happens. Holiness is what is to happen. Out of darkness we're called into his marvelous light, Peter writes. And Peter knew more about darkness than most of us, if you stop to think of it, and had looked into the very face of light himself. And we're called to have faces like that face Peter looked into, to be filled with light so that we can be bearers of light. I've seen a few such faces in my day, and I suspect you also have. Are we going to be rich, poor, beggars, thieves, or in the case of most of us, a little bit of each? Who knows? In the long run, who even cares? Only one thing is really worth caring about, and it is this: ye shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Well, Israel, as I'm sure you know, was never much good at it. God knows. If anybody knows, God knows about Israel. It's what most of the Old Testament is mostly about. Israel didn't want to be a holy nation. Israel wanted to be a nation like all the other nations, a nation like Egypt, like Syria. She wanted clout. She wanted security. She wanted a place in the sun. It was her own way she wanted, not God's way. And when the prophets, those wild men, got after her for it, she got rid of the prophets. And when God's demands seemed too exorbitant, God's promises too remote, she took up with all the other gods, who still get our votes and our money and our 9-to-5 energies because they couldn't care less, those other gods, whether we're holy or not, and promise absolutely everything we really want and absolutely nothing we really need.